Welcome everybody to the Diggen's Point podcast. This is the Doug.
This is Glorf.
This is Fort.
And today we are coming at you with a brand new podcast. We're going to be talking all about the Stormlight Archives, Reading Book Club. We're going to be continuing our categorization of Mistborn Era 2 on the Grimdark Noblebright spectrum. And we're going to be discussing Sanderson news. But first, we're going to hit you with, my friends, the preferred order of reading for the Cosmere, or how you would recommend somebody else reads the Cosmere, inspired by Brandon's post recently about the order he'd recommend introducing people to the Cosmere on. And so we're going to start by having the lovely Glorf start us out by how she would introduce people to the Cosmere.
You know, I never actually watched that Sanderson video, so I don't take his word over mine, but this is what I would recommend somebody just based on how I like them and things like that. So I would recommend they start with Tress, because Tress is happy and light, and it gives you a fun intro to Hoyt, so as you see him in later books, it's like, oh wait, I know that guy. And then I go to Warbreaker. Because Warbreaker is a little more intense. It's very Cosmere, but it's still kind of contained. And it's also a little bit happier than some other ones. But then you dive right into Mistborn Era 1. Because Mistborn they are deep and they are meaningful. And they're also, like, as we discussed last time, they are on the dark spectrum of that Grimdark, chart. And then you followed up by Elantris, another one that's just a little bit happier. And then you go right back into Mistborn Era 2. But you need a little bit of a break in the Mistborns, in my opinion, because then you get to expand yourself in the Cosmere. You're not just all dived into Scadrial. But then you go to Mistborn Era 2. Now, the confession time, I've only read the first White Sands book. But I would probably put White Sands in there, because it is something that is different, and where, at least until he writes it in like novel form, where it's a graphic novel, it's something that's a little bit, when I read the first one, I read it in like 2 days, because where it's a graphic novel, it moves much more quickly. So I'd probably put White Sands there right before Stormlight. And then you have the Stormlight Archive, and you do that all at once, including the appropriate novellas. Oh, and Mistborn Era 1 would also include Secret History, the appropriate novella for that. So you do Stormlight, and then Sunlit Man, and then Yumi. And Arcanum Unbounded, you would do the little novellas in there either with their appropriate series or just when you're bored. Like, I got Arcanum Unbounded for Christmas, and I read Shadows for Silence on Christmas Day. So the Arcanum Unbounded is just as you wish in there. I didn't miss anything, right?
You hit all the secret projects, right?
Seems like it.
Yep.
Oh yeah, Wizard's Handbook is not in
It is not.
Cosmere.
No,
Okay.
I would have to. And that's hard because I've read more of the out of Cosmere books than you gentlemen have, but I don't know where I would put them. They're almost just like, once you run out of the Cosmere, you move on to the non-Cosmere until you're ready to Cosmere again.
I want Brandon Sanderson. Mom, I want Brandon Sanderson. We have Brandon Sanderson at home, non-Cosmere. So
I feel like it'd be the Wheel of Time in that context.
Ooh, that's good. Although I was
Wheel of Time.
So I was just talking to met a new guy at work today. He's big into and we were talking over video chat. He has his bookshelf in the background, and I mean, I'm a total nerd, but and you should know this. If you're ever on a video chat with me and you have a bookshelf on the background, the first thing I'm going to do is ignore whatever you're saying and start scanning your bookshelf line by line, looking for Brandon Sanderson. Well, I start scanning his bookshelf, and I see 3 very large, thick books on there, and I'm all like, those are the same colors as the Way of Kings and Oathbringer and Words of Radiance. So we're going to ask him. And then we started talking about it for 15, 20 minutes. And he shows me right underneath, he has the Wheel of Time series. And here's what I asked him about it. So I've been thinking about getting to the Wheel of Time, especially after Brandon finishes up Stormlight. And I need something to do when I no longer have another 10,000 page book to look forward to. But my buddy he says to me that basically Wheel of Time starts out really great, and then it drags a little bit in the middle. And then when Brandon comes back in, it picks right back up and it starts going really intense again. So there's that.
How many books are in that series?
I think like 13. I know it's a good number, 13 to 15.
I think I know it's more than 10. Okay, so Fort, what would your recommended order be for the Cosmere?
So my recommended order, if I was to introduce someone else to the Cosmere,
Or your
I-
preferred reading order? Either or.
those are honestly two completely different answers. I'll go with preferred reading order, just for anyone who's like randomly finds this podcast like, what's this about? Warbreaker. Start with Warbreaker. It's really good, introduces a nice magic system, and gets Brandon's writings really good, but it's a nice little book that's all by itself. Then I would recommend Mistborn Era 1, because it is also very great magic system and a little bit longer with 3 books. And like Glorf said, it kind of gets a little into the darker area of things. After that, I would then recommend Stormlight Archive. Then I would recommend White Sand. Then I would recommend Era 2. Now, like Glorf, I would also recommend the Edge Dancer and Dawn Shard novellas as appropriate. The Secret History novella for Mistborn, I would recommend kind of where it's supposed to be, right after Bands of Mourning. To be fair, when I first read it, I read it after Era 1, and all of Era 2 was still a very big surprise. So there's nothing wrong with reading it before Era 2. But Brandon wrote it in the way where you read it after Bands of Mourning. And that's just kind of how it is. So that's how I would recommend it too. Then I would recommend Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell. Then I would recommend Six of the Dusk. Then probably Sunlit Man, Yumi, and Tress.
So saving the best for last.
Sure, if that's how you want to go about it.
Why
I
do you
mean,
put Tress and Yumi at the end?
so it kind of goes with my preferred personal reading order. It's timeline wise, that's where they fall. So my preferred
Okay.
reading order is the chronological order. So I always start with Elantris. I always start with Elantris because it happens at the same time or around the same time as the Recreant, not the Recreants, Aharietium.
Arietium.
4,500 years before the Stormlight Archive even really begins. So I always start with Elantris. Then I go Mistborn Era 1, Stormlight, Mistborn Era 2, and all the rest. I haven't done a reread of any of the secret projects yet, but my plan is probably Yumi, then Sunlit Man, then probably Tress. No guarantees that that's how I will do it, but
So where
do
would you
know.
put Warbreaker? Because Warbreaker
Yeah.
happens pretty early on as well.
I
Yeah.
usually do Warbreaker after Words of Radiance.
I feel like that's a good place for it too.
Yeah.
Because you get like minor spoilers for words of Radiance. Or you get minor spoilers for Warbreaker and Words of Radiance. But then you don't get any really big spoilers, and then it makes it really fun to go back and be like, wait a minute.
Especially when you reach Rhythm of War. Because that's the thing. I'm assuming we're all still spoiler happy during this portion, right?
Yeah.
Enough.
But I think it's fun because Rhythm of War, you have that whole scene with the sheets, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, I thought they were all colorful. If you've read Warbreaker, you're like, oh, I get it. Whereas otherwise, you're just like, man, that sword dude is really weird, and he knows what fossils are.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, it's also in makes statement, Zyle's statement in Words of Radiance, where Kaladin asks him, have you ever had to make a distasteful choice? And he's all like, every day is when I continue to keep breathing. It makes that a lot more deep if you read Warbreaker before, because
Yeah.
so, which, yeah, we won't talk about my fossil theory on Mistborn, but I think I brought that up here before. But
Maybe. I know we've talked about it at least, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
about it here or not. Might
About
be in the
how-
Lost Archives somewhere.
yeah. So excellent.
The Doug.
Okay.
Your turn.
So the Doug, here's the thing. So I think part of the problem with a specific recommended reading order is everybody's kind of a different style and type of reader. Now, everybody, once they get enough into it, definitely ends up being a huge fan of Brandon Sanderson, or they just have no soul because they're a ginger. And I could say that because Fort's a ginger too. So he's nodding. So, but the problem is
Doug,
that
you have a daughter who's a ginger.
I know. That's what makes it giving me excuse to say it. I also have all my children are dark eyes, so there's that. But that's the thing. So it depends on kind of where people are at. But I'd say there's generally, it's kind of like a wedding cake or tiers of how to introduce somebody into the Cosmere, depending on how big of a reader they already are and how big they are into the story and everything. Like, so the first bottom tier, like the easiest books I believe that Brandon's written to get into is Elantris and Warbreaker, because they just, and Tress, because they're very self-contained and they're written more story-like, if that makes sense. They're designed to be kind of a little bit lighter. You can read those books and finish them and feel like you have closure. And it can be a really good way to introduce you to Brandon Sanderson and say, do you like it or not? Right? Now,
Honestly, I think Elantris is a little harder to read just because of all the crazy names and everything. I'm not going to lie. That's why I don't recommend Elantris early on, is because the names and everything are just really weird.
and honestly, I don't know if it's just because of the ardent they had reading it or whatnot, but I feel like Elantris it's Brandon's first published book, and I feel it kind of shows a little bit. I feel like it's not quite as Brandon-esque. It's not as polished and smooth as some of the other ones. But again, it could just because that the ardent that read it was different than Kate Reading and Michael Kramer, who are the ardents that should narrate all of his audiobooks. But setting that aside, so that's kind of like tier one. I think tier two is where you get Mistborn, both eras. They're more like, because they're a little bit more of a commitment. Actually, I'd even say Alloy of Law can go in tier one, because you can read Alloy of Law as a standalone story and be like, boom, we're done. But I'd say the other tier two is the Mistborn series, because it's still a commitment, but you still get enough closure at the end of them that you're like, okay, I don't need to know all these crazy connections. They start to appear, but it's more self-contained. And so you can read that and be like, I enjoyed that, but I don't enjoy it so much that I'm going to become like, a crazed fanatic about Brandon Sanderson yet. Right. In fact, I actually have several people when I introduce people to Cosmere and I make recommendations, I'm like, you should start by checking out the Final Empire, get a feel for if this is really what you want or not. And a lot of people have started with the Final Empire and they read through to Hero of Ages and whatnot, and they enjoy it.
I'm going to say that the first book that Doug told me to read was Way of Kings.
So, and that's the thing, is that Stormlight is firmly tier 3. It is probably the hardest Cosmere book series to get into. And it's only for people that you're like, okay, I know they're going to stick through with this. I know it's the kind of thing they'll be into and that they're willing to push through, because I mean, everybody who reads, myself included, the first time you read The Way of Kings, you spend like the first half of the book like, okay, are we just getting set up this whole time? And you are. But then there's a part right at the end that clinches it. This is the general pattern I've seen. People read and they're like, okay, you keep acting like this is the greatest thing ever. And I mean, it's all right. It's good. Like there's some good parts. And then you get to that part, and we all know the part I'm talking about, and where everybody starts crying, in real life and everything. And then it's like something like all this, you've been pushing a boulder up this hill, and then you get to the top and the boulder starts rolling down and gaining momentum. And then people are hooked for like ever. Right. And they just can't stop there.
You just can't stop the boulder, and it makes you sad because sometimes you're like, wait, no.
No, I had a life. I had a family. But that's the thing. Now, here's something else I've noticed, though. If you start with Way of Kings, so I started right after Oathbringer came out. But I've noticed a lot of people fizzle out in the middle of Oathbringer or in Rhythm of War, because there's just so much, and if you commit to something like that, it's so compacted together and so big. I actually think it's a great idea to put Warbreaker in the middle of those, just to break up, kind of give yourself a different vibe, a different flavor, if you will. I should also add Yumi, probably tier 2. I'd say Yumi's tier 2, because it's just, I don't know, what's the best way to describe it? There's a lot going on, and you're going to get a lot more enjoyment out of it if you've already familiar with Brandon Sanderson's style and if you're already familiar with his writing, and you can spend a lot of the time looking to try and figure out, because that's one of the things Brandon does great, right? Is he's always leaving all these clues all over the place, so that the second when you finish it, you're like, you look back and you're like, oh, how did I not see it? It was there the whole time, right? Right? Am I right here?
Yeah,
So
I agree. Like, because Yumi has it can be a good intro book, but the Sanderlanche at the end starts getting into more Cosmere related stuff, like when it talks about the awakened machine, when it talks about different types of invested and everything like that. You have to understand some kind of basis before you can actually understand all of it. You can enjoy it, but you will understand and like it more if you have a background in the Cosmere already.
yeah. And because of that same reason, I'd throw Sunlit Man at tier 3, because he said he was written as a love letter to the fans. It's designed totally to be like, you guys already know, like the entire, I mean, because it's really intense and it's really like, ooh, the whole time. And I think if you don't understand everything that's connected to it and what's going on, you're going to get burnt out easily. You're going to be like, I feel like there's this tension. And at the end, it's kind of like a roller coaster that went way too fast. Like, I don't really remember what happened and I don't really understand it. And it was really intense. I mean, it was awesome. And there was the highs and the lows, but like, I mean, for example, if you haven't read Way of Kings, you're not going to realize why it's such a big deal when Nomad does the Chasm Kata and the Bridge 4 salute at the end. So that's kind of my personal opinion.
I
and
would
then-
like
yeah.
I would like to point out the fact that the Doug used the term burnt out in regards to Sunlit Man and didn't even notice the irony in that.
Or did I? No, but
I don't think you did.
I didn't. I'm not that smart. So, and then you kind of sprinkle the novellas. I feel like the novellas go in there good. Anything in Arcanum Unbounded is a good palate cleanser to kind of keep things fresh, right?
If you're ever
I also-
getting overwhelmed with Mistborn or Stormlight, just be like, okay, I'll read a short little, like something from Arcanum Unbounded, a little novella, as long as it's in the right spot. You can't read Dawn Shard after reading Way of Kings, right? Like, it's not going to make sense. But
Exactly.
Where would you
So,
put Tress?
Tress is tier 1. Sorry, I thought I
And
mentioned that. Yeah, it's a
White
really
Sands.
great intro. White Sands. So again, it's a very different format, one that I'm not familiar with, and I have to shame mea culpa. I haven't finished White Sands yet either, but I'd say it's probably tier 2. I mean, I really love the chapter in Arcanum Unbounded where it's written as an actual write book, but I feel like it's kind of tier 2, kind of where it is. But that being said, I think if you're into the graphic novels, because whatever they're called, I want to say manga, but that's not it.
manga,
Yeah,
manga,
yeah.
comic books,
Thank you for that.
manga, graphic.
Yeah, then it's a really good way to get into it. But
And
so
if you guys are wondering like about White Sand, so there's 3 White Sands. So there's White Sand 1, 2, and 3. There's also the Omnibus, which is a more canonical version, and it has all 3 of them in one. I prefer the Omnibus. I have read all 3 of them graphic separated, and then I also got the Omnibus and read it, and I think the Omnibus flows a lot more and is a lot easier. So if you ever want to get White Sand and you're seeing all these things, get the Omnibus if you can, just because it's a little easier. You don't have to get 3 separate books. It's all in one and just is a lot better.
Really? I didn't even know the omnibus existed. This was what, 4 years ago?
Omnibus
4
was
years
like, I
ago,
think,
I had,
2 or
well,
2.
I was like 4 years ago, I had a 14-hour plane ride. And so I bought all 3 White Sands to read on the plane and didn't get to any of them. So I'm hearing as I bought 3 books 4 years ago that I never read just to find out I need a different version.
well, the omnibus only came out in 2022, so
Yeah.
Oh,
so you don't
And
have
if
to
it
feel
make
bad.
yeah, if it makes you feel better, like when I first saw it, it's from a company called Dynamite, and I'm like, I don't know if this is a scam or not because I didn't really hear much about it. I bought it, I end up getting. I'm like, oh, I guess it's not a scam. I guess a lot of people who got the very expensive edition, like the foil and everything, there have been a lot of shipment problems with it. I don't know if it's gotten better since then. I just remember because I listened to Shardcast, the 17th Shard, and I heard them talking about the shipment issues and the foils and everything with it.
Awesome. Well, all of our listeners, you let us know down below in the comments what order you would recommend reading it in, or even more fun, what order you ended up reading the Cosmere in, because we'd love to hear from you. But now it's time for your weekly report, or bi-weekly report, since we only do this every other week, with Fort, Glorf, and the Doug on Sanderson News.
Yeah, so for Sanderson News, we've been doing this for 14 weeks, and I just recently decided to actually take notes of when I watched the weekly update. So I have actual bullet points. So first one he announced, he's at 15% done with Stormlight 5 3.0 version. He's supposed to be finished with that by the end of March, and then his fourth revision, 4.0, is supposed to be due by the end of May. Skyward Legacy with Jancy is done. There is a new free digital download for Skyward short story that is going to be released. So you can look on Sanderson's page for that. They'll have that available. I'm excited for that, actually. January 30th, you can get packs of the pins that they had on the Year of Sanderson, like the wax, the stairs, everything. You can get those
I am
starting
so
January
glad.
30th.
My wax is bent and it keeps falling off. So it makes my heart just, I feel less stress in my life knowing I can buy a replacement if I lose it.
All right, yeah. So for anyone who didn't back the Year of Sanderson, you can still go buy those wonderful pins because they are awesome. You can even get the special Sanderson pin as well. Hotels are available for Dragonsteel 2024. That will be in December. So the hotels are on right now, but not the tickets quite yet. They said the ticket should be available around springtime. And the pre-order campaign for Wind and Truth for Barnes & Noble is coming up on the 24th and 26th, where you can get discounts on that for pre-order. That is all the Sanderson news that I had in my notes that he talked about that I felt were significant to mention.
The only other thing I've seen is the what are they called? The Say the Words. They're the little short videos that go with the Words of Radiance leatherbound. I think they've done 2 more since our last episode, and they were just as you predicted, Truth Watcher and Deathbringer.
Yep.
So yeah.
Which that was pretty impressive again for it. So I would finally listen to Say the Words. I went back and listened to Skybreaker, and gal who did that did not like the Skybreaker. She has some sort of beef with them. She doesn't realize why we need order and structure and rules and whatever.
I think she has a beef with most of the orders in reality, except for
She loved the
Edge
Edge
Dancers.
Dancers.
yeah.
I thought it was funny how she described them as so graceful. And you can ask the Doug and Ford. I am not the most graceful person. So I did not. I'm listening to how graceful the Edge Dancers are, and I'm like, I must not be a real Edge Dancer.
Listening to the Truth Watcher one, I'm like, does this really go with the stump though? Like, really? Because the stump is supposed to be a Truth Watcher.
Not supposed to be.
And-
She is.
Yeah, she is a Truth Watcher. And a lot of the characteristics that mention, I'm like, is that really the stump though?
Well, like you look
Well,
how she, the
Go
way
ahead,
she
Glorf.
treats the kid, I guess, and I'm just looking at the way she treats the kids. She's trying to find the kids that are really disabled, the ones that are really like this. So while it's not like seeking after like, scholarly truths or whatever, but you can see that the stump is very, I don't know, thoughtful in that way. Like she's aware of what's, I don't know, maybe that's not the same thing, but
I also think we don't get a lot of viewpoint of the stump, right?
That is
I
true.
mean, she gets like 2 chapters in a
Edge
novella,
Dancer.
Edge Dancer, and a little bit of a viewpoint in Rhythm of
Rhythm.
War.
Yeah,
Now, the
that's
real
true.
problem is, and that she should be offended about, is they all lied about their pancakes. And I'm telling you, the Skybreaker in me is all like, that's a grievous sin, and Nell should have put the whole city to the sword right there. Because they lying about pancakes. It's a metaphorical pancake? No, get out of here with that crap. I was promised 10 pancakes. I got 9. So,
You know who else is in charge of 9?
Odium. Proof that
Exactly.
the Tashiki are all in league with Odium are going to turn on the back. They're probably
Yep.
the ones who
Odium's
gave
pancakes.
Teravangian the diagram idea in the first place. Odium's pancakes, that's what it is. That would be a great name for a house, for a Waffle House. Like, Odium's pancakes. I'd open that. Like if I was in Silverlight, I'd totally open up Odium's pancakes. So good you'll rage about them.
And it would end up being exactly like all the Waffle House stereotypes. because, you know, passion.
Waffle House is in fact the avatar of odium on our planet. New head theory canon. And if if none of you guys have ever been to Waffle House, so I haven't been to many Waffle Houses. I saw a couple in Ohio, but I've talked to a lot of people. They're very popular down south. I've talked to several people I know that live down south. I'm like, is this really what Waffle House is like? Is the stereotypes exaggerated? Every one of them has been like, no, Waffle House is just like a full out brawl with food and just everything you can think about Waffle House, and it's worse somehow. But we're not talking about Waffle House. We're talking about pancakes and the tashiki being in league with odium. And that brings us to the book club, but it doesn't because there's nothing about the tashiki or the odium. But it is about Stormlight, so it's okay. So, for those who have been following along, the reading schedule for this last week was a Bloody Red Sunset. Was the last chapter we listened to. And so the new one is we went from chapter 18, A High Prince of War, where Dalinar starts talking to Elhokar and is all like, hey, what if instead of fighting for gem hearts, we actually went and fought the Parshendi? And Elhokar's response is, if you can get somebody else to team up with you, be all buddy and show me the power of friendship, maybe I'll think about it. And Dalinar's all like, come on, I want to be High Prince of War so I can get these people into gear. And Elhokar's all like, no. Then we end with chapter 36, The Lesson, which is the most intense Shallan chapter probably in most of the book. Definitely one of the top three, where Jasnah decides to go down a sketchy alley, and Shallan's like, hey, maybe sketchy alley's not where we want to go. And she's like, no, I know what I'm doing. She's like, see, it's like, okay, because a lot of people have been beaten and robbed here and killed. And then it's all like, wait, this is not making it any better, Jasnah. Maybe we should go. She's like, no, I've got a really cool lesson, see? And then she's all like, these guys jump out, and they're all like, hey, give us her stuff. And then she says, you could be fire instead. And suddenly they burst into flame. And she's like, see, it's a lesson in chemistry. Don't piss me off.
She doesn't turn all of them into fire. She turns one into fire, two into smoke, and one into crystal. Some kind of rock. Yeah,
Exactly.
crystal.
Crystal. I finished listening it today. Turns it into crystal, and while it dims the diamond, it still creates like a prism as the light goes through it. You're like, that is. I noticed today, and I don't know why I haven't noticed it before, but his descriptions as he's describing Carpentrouth at night, and it just like the imagery and like the words he uses, it's beautiful. And then it's followed by Jasnah homicide, but it's not homicide.
Murder.
That's homicide. She killed somebody.
It's not. Yeah,
Justifiable
but
homicide, self-defense. Yes, it's still homicide. Justifiable homicide, still homicide.
Justifiable homicide, yeah. But it's just the way he describes
Depends on how you
Carpentrouth
see it.
it's really cool. And then that part where it talks about like the light going through the crystal corpse, you're like, oh man, that's some strong language.
Yeah.
Strong descriptions.
So, and the other big thing that happens is all of the bridgemen have fallen in line because Kaladin's all like, you know what people love? Stew. And I'm like, yes, I love good stew. And so he gets Rock to cook good stew. And then he's all like, hey, maybe we could use the bridge as a shield. But then they have to go out on the bridge run. And he's all like, no, we need to save everybody. Crap. Okay, we don't have enough time, but we're going to do side carry anyway. And he saves all of Bridge 4, but he screws up the entire rest of the army because all the other bridgemen are like, hey, it's a way to not die. Why don't we try doing that? And they do it really bad because they're not good at it and haven't been practicing, and they all end up dead, and the whole army falls apart. And then Kaladin gets hung up in the high storm for the Stormfather to judge. And that part's so good because at the very end of the high storm,
like a piece of wet laundry. It's so stressful
Exactly.
listening to it.
And then the end comes, and like the end of the chapter comes, and Rock comes out, and he's all like, and Kaladin's eyes open, and he breathes in, and everyone's like, he survived! Whoa! And then it cuts over to a Shallan chapter, and I'm not gonna lie, first time reading it, even I skipped. I'm like, I don't care about this right now. I don't care about Shallan. Yeah, she's really great. Whatever. Let's deal with this.
What's funny,
But,
it means that you skipped the lesson chapter.
I came back to it, but at the meantime, I was like, wait, Kaladin's alive? Is he gonna live? So
Well, and you didn't know how cool chapter 36 was, so of course you skipped it.
exactly. So, and in the meantime, Shallan also decides to flirt with some priest, some ardent, and she's all like, I like bald men. He's hunky. And he tries to be all like, I'm here to save your soul, but also convince Jasnah, etc., etc.
Oh,
And-
and we forgot like the most important part of chapter 36 at the very end.
Oh,
Shalon
yeah.
looks at she used
Oh,
something
yeah.
so holy to murder people, and Shalon goes, you know what? Never mind. I no longer have any qualms, and swaps the soul casters.
Oh, yeah. I totally forgot about that part. I'll be honest. There was the Kaladin and the thing right before it, and the only thing I was thinking the entire time, okay, yeah, but let's get back to Kaladin. So
Yeah, Shalon just like, I won't still it. It's okay. I don't know what I'll do, but it'll be okay. Oh, you just murdered people. Yeah, no, you don't get this anymore. This is mine.
oh yeah.
Yoink.
Okay,
Quick
here's what
change.
I
Quick
can't
turnaround.
stand about Shalon the entire time is her solution is let's steal the most holy artifact in Vorinism from the most powerful woman in the world to make some rocks and protect our family instead of being like, I don't know, hey, Jasnah, so here's also the story. My family's broke as all get out. We don't have 2 pennies to rub together, and a bunch of people want to kill us. Could we get like a loan, or could you maybe just, I don't know, could you go talk to some of the more creditors with a bad temper and explain to them why it's a bad idea to raise their voice with your voice with their voice when you're talking to them or something? Could you do any? It just, it feels
Well,
to me
what's
like a
funny is
very
she's succeeding.
obtuse solution to what's when there's a much better path there. And like I get that why she's coming from and everything, but still it just because like
But
at
hey,
the
she's
beginning when she's like,
succeeding.
yeah, at the beginning, yeah, she's like, Yasna's a heretic and evil and whatnot. Okay, that's bad. But then she realizes Yasna's not everything she thought, and that the woman's actually reasonable and whatnot. And so maybe just like, hey, could you write to, hey, Yasna, why don't you come create some marble deposits for us? That'd be
Here's the thing,
solid.
because the only soul casters held, aside from Yes, No, always in the church. So she has 2 options: steal from the church, and she loses her soul, or she steals from a heretic, and maybe she can still end up in the Tranquiline Halls. Now she just has like these horse blinders on, where it's like, this is the only solution. This is the only thing I can do. I need to do this. And then these creepy guys come up. They're like, hey, you have something of ours, and we want it back. And now she's like, well, now I really need a soul caster. So that just like took her horse blinders and like shoved them closer to her face. So she's like, I now need this even more than I previously did.
I mean, yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't, like, I get where Shalon's coming from. I'm just saying Shalon spends the entire book thinking about how witty and clever she is. And if there's anything that proves she's not, it's that her solution wasn't to just, hey, yes. And by the way, just hypothetically, if one of your wards was like in serious financial doo-doo, would you do something about, would you be willing to give them a loan or something?
Yeah,
But
hindsight's 2020, and Shalon's right in the middle of it.
yeah, so, but we're talking about Shalon way too much when we could be talking about Kaladin and the Bridgemen. Also, we had some interludes with Risen and Axis the Collector, who is an Aeonian, and Zeth, Sun Villano, Truthless of Shinovar, who gets used to be like finally somebody who like knows what Zeth can do. So like, hey Zeth, I killed your old master as soon as you walked out the door, and now I own your old stone. You're gonna go kill this long list of people. He's all like, okay, fine. And then he gets really scared because he realizes, oh, he gonna kill everybody. Hide your kids, hide your high princes, hide your kings, because he killing everybody up in here. He killing everybody.
Hydro Bright Lords, Hydro High Princes.
Mm-hmm.
I feel so bad for Zeth. You read the prologue and it's like, oh my gosh, he murdered it. But then every like interlude we have with him after that is like, I didn't want to do it. This is like the oath stone. You hear about the oath stone. You hear his internal monologue of how he doesn't want to kill these people. He actively chooses not to use his shard blade to kill people when he can. Like, I just feel so bad for Zeth.
Well, it kind of even mentions it, I think, in the prologue. It's very brief, but when he sees Gavilar in the shard plate, he's like, oh, maybe an opponent who can actually kill me. I agree. As we go and we see Zeth's viewpoints, it's just like we see
But
how
did
broken he is, and it makes you sad a little bit for what he has to do.
But you guys have noticed, I mean, this is multiple times through, but any of our first time readers, did you notice when oh, what's Risen's Bab's name? I know it.
Wisdom.
Stim.
Vistim. Vistim's in Shinovar. What does he talk to the Shin farmer about?
The
Sell me
truthless that was
another-
sold.
Yep, it's the best servant I ever had, and you realize that's where Seth came from. And just his look, because we don't know at this point, we don't know, heck, even those of us that have read all the way, we don't understand much about what it is to be truthless. But that farmer going, I hope we never have another one. Like, whatever made Zeth into what he is now, like, led him to this was not good. Just based on that farmer's reaction. So.
Oh, we also had Kaladin flashback chapters where they got a new city lord, and Kaladin was all like, I guess the big chapter, and this is one of the points, this and the next flashback chapter are very important points for Kaladin's development. Liren gets drunk and he's bored while Kaladin's studying, and then he starts going on a drunken rant to his son, like, leave here. Hearthstone sucks. Everyone here sucks. I'm drunk. I'm Liren. I'm the town surgeon. I'm grumpy, and you're not a doctor. And then these people come up to rob all the spheres from him, and he pulls off the lamp or the shade off the spheres, and he's like, you guys want it? You come and take it. And they realizes it's all people from the town. And for Kaladin, that's a big moment, because before he's been so focused on, I'm going to figure out how to be a soldier and then I can be a hero. But now he suddenly sees, wait, there are super heroic things you can do. And just because my dad doesn't want to fight doesn't mean he's a coward. He's starting to see the different perspectives of heroism. And so for me, I think that's a poignant moment in Kaladin's development. Yes, Glorf, what were you saying? Because you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I had forgotten. It's also just the beginning, because that's the thing. Rashon comes, the other flashback chapter we have, right? Rashon comes, he looks at everyone and goes, meh, and leaves. And then the next interaction we have is just hearing that Rashon said something and no one is paying Liren anymore. We actually have no interaction with Rashon between when he comes to Hearthstone and that chapter with the goblet and everybody coming trying to steal it from him. Like, I think it's just interesting that is how we meet Rashon, is in those two things, and we already have such a good idea of his character, right? He doesn't care about the people in Hearthstone. Kaladin brings up, like, Kaladin in the flashback chapter, like, he must have done something dumb and that's why they sent him here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's, Kaladin comes to that conclusion on his own as a
Hope
teenager.
that doesn't come back to later. I hope that doesn't come back later to stab him in the gut. That'd be terrible.
And then you hear that all he said is one thing, that everybody's already hopping to his word, right? He says one thing and nobody pays Liren anymore. And that's all we know about Rashon, but that tells us so much about him and why at this point it is very okay to hate him.
Well, and so that's one thing I love about how Sanderson did that is, so I read this book once about how to develop characters and viewpoints and whatnot. And it's all about, one of the things it emphasizes, if you really want people to hate your character, don't make them like super evil. Like Sauron's a bad dude, but nobody like hates Sauron. Nobody has like a personal animosity towards Sauron. Or
Sauron's an entity.
Yeah. May the Almighty forgive me. Let's look at the difference between Umbridge and Voldemort. Voldemort's the evil genocidal maniac that wants to kill everybody that will sleep with anybody but their cousins. Meanwhile, everybody hates Umbridge more. Why? Because she's a petty bully. And Rashon's the same way. He's not like this big bad evil like Odium. He's not like, cunning like Sadeas. He's just a punk. He's the kind of guy that, like, I feel bad about who I am and I'm going to take it out on everybody else, just like Lamoral and just like Gaz. And so he's just, that's how I love how Brandon frames that.
One writing philosophy that I've kind of noticed is to get someone to hate someone, make them kick a puppy.
Yeah.
If someone kicks a puppy, you know immediately they're evil and you hate them. Because only petty people who we hate kick puppies. Not like a dog, like a feral mean dog, no. Like a little cute puppy that is like, oh, I want some food. It's like, get out of here, and you kick him. Instantly, hate. You kick puppy.
There's an entire action franchise. One of the most successful ones of the past decade is built on that simple premise of, hurting doggies, right? John Wick goes on a multi-100-man murder spree because they killed his dog. And at no point is anybody ever like, oh, maybe he's not the good guy. No, everybody's immediately like, they killed the puppy, they deserve to die. There's even a great, if you watch the channel Pitch Meeting, that's what the joke is in the pitch meeting, is that the screenwriter guy holds up a picture of a puppy and he's all like, I'm gonna make you hate me, and he punches the puppy, and then so like, somebody better die for that. So don't mess with doggos. So Okay. Here's one thing I noticed that I've never noticed before. And this isn't technically spoilers because I'm not saying anything, but it's just something to pay attention to. Okay. So I can't remember exactly what chapter it is. It's I think it's before Chasm Duty. It's when Kaladin, or what's his name, Dalinar, he goes out on a bridge run. He's all like, you know what? A bridge run will do me and all my men good. Let's go and get some fight and whatnot. And he's all like, and so he goes to do the bridge run, and he jumps across the chasm because him and Adolin are cool like that. They jump across the chasm in their shard plate to open up a bridgehead for the other people. And he's laying to waste all these Parshen, and he's all like, he's feeling the thrill, and he's all like, yeah, woo, oh man, this is what's great. I'm feeling all big and strong. And the bridges come down. And here's what happens is that there's some Wendspren that show up and come past him, which is a little bit weird. You don't think anything of it because, of course, there'd be wind because the bridges come down because these are big old siege bridges. But is there really enough wind? And he hears a voice that tells him, you shouldn't be happy about this. Or I think it might even just said unite them. And suddenly he looks around and realizes, wait a minute, I'm doing a horrible thing. The kid I just killed is like 16 years old. Oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person. Like, this is not, this is not honor or glory. This is just butchery. I'm going around slaughtering people. And he almost gets sick. And then he's like, well, at least I need to protect my men right now. So that's good enough reason to fight. But he's struggling with it the whole time. And I've just noticed that there and in several other places, just pay attention when the wind happens. And then people hear a voice that's not their own. Usually, for Kaladin, it's usually his father's voice. Or people will hear a voice that's not their own, or they'll have a thought that they don't usually have, and the wind will appear. The wind will appear. Just pay attention to that. It's an interesting thing to look for. And if you know why, you'll know why. But
and if not, then you'll get it faster than we did by paying attention.
Yeah, so something to look out for through the rest of the books.
And so, sorry, going back to, we've already kind of talked about Kaladin and the High Storm, but the Doug brought up an interesting question before we started. What do you think it was right for Kaladin to promise his men that he would wake up? Now he did, but he didn't actually think he would. So was that right for him to do that?
Sometimes it's okay to lie. And this is
Just
one of those
exactly
times.
what he said to Syl.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So it's an interesting, perspective. Now,
The best that happens is he wakes up and he gives them hope, and he is now a new beacon and a new almighty for these men to make change. The worst that happens is he ends up dead, and they still continue in their lives to still better because of him.
But yeah, I don't
About
know.
you, Doug.
So here's the thing. Let's talk about Zeth for a minute. If it had been Zeth, he wouldn't have been okay with the lying. And it's an interesting question. Is this lying okay? Because he's trying to do it for a good reason. And so, I think ultimately he's vindicated by events, and he does survive. That's the important part. But to me, it always, I don't know. I'm not saying that I disagree or anything. I just think it's an interesting problem to consider. I think the general consensus of almost everybody is Kaladin gives a good enough explanation that, listen, it can't hurt it. His whole argument basically boils down to it can't hurt anything. But because if I die, they knew I was going to die anyway. And if I live even a little bit, they'll be all like, oh. But I don't know. It's an interesting back and forth. So
it's a little bit like Syl's argument when he's like, why would I try again? And she goes, well, they have nothing to lose.
Ooh,
they either die or you make it better. It almost is like a reflection of what Syl said to him, only in this case, it's more about surviving. Yeah. Also, another part, my favorite Syl part from that chapter is when he thinks he sees a little blue form holding her hands out to the storm.
Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting in and of itself, because does she have the ability to part the storm? She's a quote wind unquote spren.
She is a very odd spren.
We love her though.
So
she did enough.
Do we have anything else we want to talk about during this spoiler-free session? Or are we ready to move on to? So listeners, I don't know if we said it outright last time. We've decided there's so many connections with Stormlight Archive and the rest of the Cosmere that at the end of each book club, we're going to have a short spoiler section where we're talking about where we are in Stormlight Archive, but in regards to other things. And so I think we're good to move on to that today. So spoilers from here on out. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. My question. Going to Dalinar's vision. Okay. And the midnight essence there. So we have the midnight essence in the vision that he's fighting, like claws them open, like it's actively there and destructive, right? We have the midnight essence there. We have the midnight mother in Urithiru, and we have the midnight sea in Tress. So what, like, because that's the thing, we've talked about it before. What is the midnight essence? It shows up, but I had forgotten it was part of Dalinar's visions. So did the Midnight Mother make those midnight things?
Yes. I think on Roshar, the Midnight Mother is in charge of all Midnight Essence on there.
But I don't know that it mentioned the Midnight Mother at all. I think it was said in regards to like the edge dancer that was there talking to Dalinar said something about like the 10 deaths, which I think is interesting because 10 is a holy number. So I would be 10 deaths instead of 9 deaths. But that's another question.
Always more questions. There's always another secret.
Yep, pretty much.
So here's another. Oh, go ahead.
Because with midnight spores, right, that we see kind of in other places, it can't act all on its own. And so I think the Midnight Essence Mother, the Midnight Mother, has to be controlling them. Now, it can be an overarching command of go kill with like a whole bunch of them, or it can be more specific and concrete, like what happens in Urithiru, where there is only one aspect where she is controlling it more hands-on.
Well, and the other question that goes along with this is the Midnight Essence, insofar as we understand it, based on Tress, works not on the nail bond, which we're used to, which is a trait of investiture, but on the Lul bond, which is water for...
It's a trade. It's not always water. On Lumar, it's water. But
also on White Sand it is.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even think of that, because it's kind of the same stuff as White Sands. Oh, wow. Ooh.
I really need to read that now.
Although, here's another interesting point, though, about the Midnight Essence. A shard blade cuts it. So what does that mean?
Oh.
It has some spiritual aspect.
No, it had a spiritual
It
aspect.
cuts
Shard
it,
blade couldn't
so it
cut it.
doesn't have a spiritual aspect.
Wait, what?
Because if your spiritual aspect, the shard blade just shears through your spirit, but leaves yourself.
Okay.
No,
And
causes
that
no
goes for
physical
limbs
damage.
too. It doesn't cut off limbs, it kills the limbs like that. So if these were all limbs of the Midnight Mother, it still wouldn't cut it. Like limbs, quote unquote. But yeah.
I'm kind of confused on what you're saying, honestly.
Okay, if I cut you, you're alive. And so if I cut you with the shard blade, there's no physical change in you, right? Because it's the shard blade and it cuts your spirit. But then when you're dead, I can cut you up, right? If the shard blade is causing a physical cut in the Midnight Essence, that means it has no spiritual aspect and it's not quote unquote alive. So what's the deal with that? What's the deal with Midnight Essence? Am I right, George?
I cannot wait for the day when you have more of those answers. Because just when Midnight Essence showed up in Tress, all of a sudden it was like, hold on. This is so much bigger than Roshar now. But it could be some sort of little bond with the Midnight Mother, right? Maybe the Midnight Mother herself isn't Midnight Essence, but she has some sort of Lul bond with the Midnight Essence that she spreads across Roshar. I don't know. Like maybe Midnight Mother controls Midnight Essence the same way Jasnah not, creates and controls corrupted Spren. Jasnah like, right, she isn't one of those little corrupted Spren. She kind of makes them and controls them. Same with Midnight Mother. I don't know.
You look deep in thought there, Fort.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, because Glorf, right, we have a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. Because Midnight Essence comes up very infrequently. It comes up this time, and it comes up in Oathbringer. I don't think it comes up much after though, and it's just
Not yet,
like
at least. Because we haven't run into the Midnight Mother again. She's not gone for good, but we have not run into her again since Oathbringer.
exactly.
Well, and it's possible that Odium's keeping the Unmade away from the battlefield because he knows that now that the Radiants know how to trap Spren, like they took what's his bucket, the Thrill, Yelignar. No, not Yelignar. Can't remember what his name is. But
Something with like a Y or something, yeah.
yeah, something with a Y or a G or not a J though. No, can't be a Y because Brandon hates Ys. That's why it's Jasnah with a J.
What about Yelignar though? That has a
Yeah.
Y.
Okay. So and they threw that in the middle of the ocean. So who knows what's going on there?
In an aluminum box, and it's safer than it actually sounds, apparently, according to Brandon.
An aluminum box? Heck yeah. Like, I mean, I'm just saying,
I understand, yeah.
like, in the real world, it's like, okay, aluminum, whatever. But, you know, if I ended up in the Cosmere, the first thing I'd do is start grabbing aluminum foil and wrapping myself up in that because I'd be impervious to everything. No emotional allomancy, no shard blades. I'd stop it all. So,
Think aluminum can start shard blades?
we have reason to believe that's what What's Her Bucket's sheath
half
is made out
shards?
of. No, the half shards work by powering the Stormlight. They draw
Oh, okay.
Stormlight, but I'm talking about What's Her Bucket? High
Azure.
Marshal Azure. Also, Zeth, Nightblood Sheath, also aluminum. So it's reasonable to assume if aluminum can stop Nightblood, it can probably stop any darn thing, right? I mean, honestly,
Fair.
if all Dalinar had to do was hold up a piece of aluminum foil when Odium was trying to control his brain, and it would have been all like, "Oh, my power! I am weak against the foil." I mean,
I've been
who-
foiled.
Please, Brandon, if you ever listen to this, make that a joke at some point. Have somebody scream, "I've been foiled" when somebody uses, you know, aluminum on them. But yeah, I mean, who would win? A sheet of shiny metal or God's own divine hatred pure personified? Apparently a sheet of shiny metal. So who would win? A smoking pointy stick? A smoking shiv? Or, you know, God's own the god of anger and hate? Apparently a smoking pointy stick, as we can see when Nightblood totally rams through Rays. So
That was definitely an intense part that we will come to later this year. Anything
yeah.
else, or are we ready to move to the Grimdark spectrum?
Awesome. Let's get to it. So we're going to start with Alloy of Law. We're going to go Era 2 Mistborn. To me, Era 2, Alloy of Law, is possibly Noblebright or Grimdark.
almost feels like-
Grimbright. Like,
Yeah. It almost feels
Noble-
like Era 2 was like a rebound. Like Era 1 was so dark. Brandon Sanderson's like, here is something lighter for you. Like,
I
don't
want
know.
to say Alloy of Law is Grimbright to me, but I could be swayed in
Um,
different directions. It's not Grimdark. I wouldn't say it's in that lower portion.
I won't even say it's Grim Bright because the stakes aren't that high in Alloy of Law, right? It's Miles' 100 lives and the kidnapped women, but we're not talking on a worldwide scale, right? Things are going to suck. It's going to be really sad if Wax can't get to Steris, but the world's not going to end. So I don't even know if Grim Bright.
What about Noble? True Noble?
I guess my thought is I definitely think it falls either Noble, Bright, or Bright. Because here's the thing. I don't like when I came into Alloy of Law, I'd finished Stormlight Archive, and then I got through Mistborn Era 1 and Secret History, and so then I came to Alloy of Law, and it was like a breath of fresh air because I'm like, wait, hold on. Everything's not miserable all the time, and everybody's not in risk of dying. And like, there are good things in the plot. I don't know. I think maybe part of it's because Alloy of Law was intended to be a standalone book, right? But Brandon just couldn't put it down because that's Brandon. But he decided, I think it definitely could qualify as Noble Bright or even Bright because it's just happy. It's fun. That's the thing, is that these people are doing good things. Even though there's a bad guy, he gets stopped in the end by the police. The world's getting bigger and brighter and better. And it's not
the
like,
Wild West.
Exactly. And I mean, it even ends with, it doesn't end with Suit twirling his mustache and being all like, yeah, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for that meddling lawman. No, it ends with Wax showing up in his train car and being all like, I'm gonna stop it, Uncle, or else. And then at the end, you're like, oh man, his uncle got away. But then he's like, I got his book. I got all his appointment book. I know all the things he did. And they're like, oh yeah.
I think it
And so
looks a lot better with the Bright / Noblebright just because coming off of Hero of Ages is so grimdark. It's like the contrast with it
Yeah.
is it looks a lot brighter and better because of how dark that Hero of Ages was.
And so, yeah, I'd put it on right on the line of Noble, Bright, and Bright because I mean, not everybody's good, and some bad things happen. But at the end, the hero gets the girl.
The butler
hero
blows
gets
himself up.
the butler blows himself up. Wayne still has his lucky hat, and Marcy realizes, oh, I'm not completely useless, and I get promoted to be the best person in the thing because I just took out the most notorious criminal, right? And I mean, we've got a couple of plot hooks for going on later, but I mean, overall, I'd say Noble, Bright, regular, Bright.
I can go with Noblebright. You can see that.
I didn't know that Alloy of Law was supposed to be standalone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Brandon Sanderson,
The
so
whole
he's
Wax
probably
and
like,
Wayne series has been like the weirdest writing session of Brandon's life, honestly.
Because it was supposed to be a standalone, and then it was supposed to be a trilogy, and then
Well, he starts off with Alloy of Law that's supposed to be just a book. Then he starts writing Shadows of Self, gets halfway through and doesn't know what he wants to do. So he writes Bands of Mourning and then comes back and finishes Shadows of Self.
oh, I see
And
that.
then he finishes with Lost Metal.
So, okay, actually, that actually makes a whole lot of sense because I'm not going to lie, and we'll get to this in a minute. There seems to be a tonal shift. Alloy of Law, and then it seems a huge tonal shift from Shadows of Self, and then Bands of Mourning seems to be more in line with Alloy of Law. But
Yeah.
I guess I can go next. I'll start next with Shadows of Self. That one goes back to like dark. Right. It's not, I mean, I'm not, nothing about it's bright because like the entire book, you're like, the city is on the edge of riot and there's this evil entity that God can't see who's creating horrible monstrosities and hemalurgic spikes. And this entire time, and
there's a crazy hemalurgically person on the loose.
yeah. And then at the end, when you're like, we've solved the mystery. Oh crap, we solved the mystery and there's nothing we can do because like the person we were supposed to be protecting is actually the one doing all this. Oh my gosh. And part of it, and again, that's the thing. Grimbright, Noblebright, Grimdark, all that. It's not like a strict, like these specific things, not a checklist. It's the general overall feel. And again, for me, the feel is even though the world doesn't end at the end, we get that flashback to, and I bring it up all the time. But for me, the most poignant moment in Era 2 is when Wax is holding Leslie's body and he's bawling because he realizes I just had to kill my wife. I had to see my wife die again, and God didn't tell me. And he's all like, God, you have Harmony, you have no idea how this feels. You have no idea what this is like. And Harmony gives him the same impression that he had of him holding Tyndall's body. And he's all like, oh my gosh. And for Wax, but it's not enough. And so even though the world doesn't end, Wax's world has ended.
And to us as the reader, it means our world has also ended.
Exactly. And
I can
so,
agree that it belongs in dark. Not grim dark, but dark for sure. Like
maybe
that
Noble
tone,
Dark.
like I don't want to say noble dark because I have to think of the scene with what she does to that one priest. Where
Oh yeah.
she,
I
like,
mean, it also gets
yeah.
pretty grisly with the
Yeah.
but like ultimately there can be Wax gets destroyed, but the other people make it through okay. Like,
so would it be
I don't
less
know.
dark and more grim? Because the world is still good. But
I
like
guess
the
for me,
because like on this little chart I have, it's like accomplishments are fleeting, or it's more about the ability to do things. And so like heroes suffer so peace and decency can be maintained. So maybe it's less dark and more grim.
I guess maybe that's the way. In my mind, it kind of falls under Noble Dark. Really bad things happen, and they have to happen. It goes on the line Noble Dark and Dark. Bad things happen. Really bad things have to happen. The hero ends up having to get destroyed. God turns out to be a traitor, and but you do still have the moments in the bar, right? That's one of my favorite scenes in all of Sanderson is when Wayne visits the Temple of the Common Man and talks about all of that. And so, but
Wait,
they
is
do
it,
manage to avoid the rain.
is this the one where Wayne impersonates God? Impersonates death.
No, that's the next one. But this is the way it goes to the Temple of the Common Man, and he's all like, the food is rubbish, and he starts thinking philosophically, well, if the food is rubbish and we eat the food, is we rubbish then, and things like that. And I don't know. I just love all
And
of
his
Wayne's
answer is
viewpoints.
to get everybody drunk. If everybody's
Exactly.
drunk, all the problems will be solved.
Yeah, I guess for me, Wayne alone ensures that you can never get too grimdark in Era 2, because he's just such a breath of fresh air.
Doug, do you want to tell them really quick about the Christmas gift you got?
Okay, so Brandon, if you're reading this, what we need, loved one of mine gave me a Tumblr with custom quotes on it, but I had mentioned before, what we need a book called The Wayne of Kings, which is just a bunch of Wayne quotes and Wayne stories, because that would be awesome. But I got a wonderful Tumblr entitled The Wayne of Kings that's covered entirely in various hats and Wayne quotes, such as,
Read us a few.
looks like we're going to need a new prime suspect, Wax. This one downright refuses to not be dead already. Or, Wayne, I have a chair like that just back in my study in the penthouse. That you do. You do indeed. It's still one of my favorite quotes. Logic doesn't work on Wayne. I'll put a ward against it. Off a traveling fortune teller. It lets me add 2 and 2 and get a pickle. Right? Wayne's just the best. Right? I mean, and yeah. Which is why I'm not even mad that the trilogy had turned into a quadrilogy, because we had to kind of end Wayne's story. Wax's ends in Bands of Mourning, but Wayne still needs closure. So, which is just Glorf. I guess, are we all feeling comfortable? So we definitely agree it's either grim or dark, but not grim dark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Shadows itself is a hard one. Okay, Bands of Mourning. Where do we start with Bands of? It's like I have to think, because they all kind of blend together. Bands of Mourning that's one where they try to get married, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then everything goes
Wayne
wrong.
floods it.
Yeah.
And then it ends with them. They find out that Wax's sister is still alive. They find the flying ship, and eventually the Bands of Mourning.
Yeah.
We find out Wax's sister is bad.
Yeah. Telson,
that's her name. And that one is a little bit more high stakes. Just because we find out that the set is doing bigger things and we're dealing with bigger things. But I would
could
say
be Noblebright then.
Maybe no, not even Noblebright. Because that's the thing, the world isn't a bad place at this point. In fact, the world is a good place, and they're trying to save the world, right? So maybe it's almost more Grimbright, because the world is good, things are good, but it's harder and harder for them to make progress. It's harder and harder for them to make changes, right? Because they do all this work, they have the Bands of Mourning, but then all of a sudden they now have another continent to deal with, right? And relationships with these people. They realize Telson gets away, but then they're the good things that happen, right? Wax and Sarah still get married. Wax doesn't die, despite the fact he almost does.
I mean, he did die, but he came back. He got better.
He got better. So maybe Grimbright,
I can see Grimbright, yeah.
What do you guys think?
I think I'd go with, it's definitely bright, and here's why. It's definitely in the top 2. It's not in the bottom 3, and here's because there is so much exciting new things to discover. You're like, aliens, they found aliens. Oh my gosh, wow, aliens. What's that's going to be like? They have all these new technologies coming in, and it's
And then
just
it turns out it's just their southern neighbors, but hey.
I mean, it's aliens. They're from a different continent, maybe not a planet, but it's happy, exciting, and then at the end, things look really rusty there for a minute, but I don't know.
I also love the train scene.
Ooh, yeah.
Wayne finally gets to move on.
Oh yeah, I forgot he moves on from Renette in the train, and boy did he have a lot of energy to get out.
Oh, that's another part I love that I think is part of also what makes it bright, just in regards to even the characters. Steris really comes into herself, realizes that she's not useless. Like Steris has a much larger role in this one, and it's just lovely. So yeah, I would say on the line between like Bright and Grimbright.
Yeah, I could say Grimbright just because there are higher stakes, but so if they fail, things will get miserable. But if they succeed, things stay
Well,
generally the
even
same.
after their success, things still aren't fixed, right? We
Not
very much
fixed.
needed Lost Metal because things weren't fixed yet. Not
Yeah.
entirely.
Yeah. So I think Grimbright because, yeah, things are still there's still some sort of vast conspiracy going on and whatnot, but the day is saved for today, and it feels like things are probably going to be all right because you pass them off to Conjure and whatnot.
Yeah. And we go
So-
5 years between 5 years
Something like
between
that.
Dance of the Morning and Lost Metal. So where do we think Lost Metal goes?
This is a really hard one to place.
I do.
And
I feel like I say Noble Dark a lot in reality. I feel like this is a good example though.
Um,
You have multiple societies trying to come together and they're trying to double cross each other. Then you have this other god coming in and Harmony just like, yeah, I can't see anything and I don't know what's going on. I hope you can figure it out though, so have fun
and then
with
we're
my
getting the
problems.
weird, yeah, and the weird hemalurgy starting. There's more and more of the weird hemalurgy going on.
we have
Then
to
you
save
find
the world from.
underground.
Oh, what was that, Ford? Go ahead.
You find the people hiding underground thinking that the whole world is destroyed.
Right, and we have not one but two different apocalypses we're having to stop during the whole of Lost Metal. But on the
Uh,
flip side,
what are the two apocalypses? Autonomy coming, and then also Luther
Autonomy's army coming and
and
Telson
Elendel exploding.
nuking Elendel. Like, can we all agree that Brandon was very much trying to introduce the idea of nukes to Cosmere,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I can see
Which
that.
I mean,
That,
yeah. Go ahead,
I
Glorf.
was gonna say that scene with Wayne is just wonderful. How he's just able to fix everything and then is disappointed that the world isn't donut shaped.
Yeah, but there's actually some really interesting connections as well with Rhythm of War, with the whole idea of two different god metals mixing and annihilating. But that's not
Yeah.
the discussion we're having right now. I think, yeah, Noble Dark, or at least Noble, because that's the thing, right? Is that it's very much a rush against the clock, and I don't know how do I describe this? The way I usually picture books, I don't know, this is me getting on a personal tangent here, but oftentimes the way I will classify a book is based on the mental image I have on my mind of what the general story, what phase of the sun, what the weather's like in the general story, right? And so through all of Shadows of Self, I'm thinking constantly it's nighttime, it's dusk, it's dark, and it just feels the dark, oppressive tone. Alloy of Law, it feels bright and sunny the whole time. The shootout on top of the train carriage, Wayne, them going to the Vanisher's hideout and whatnot. And even though the climactic battle happens at nighttime, it's still like it comes with a dawn. And in my mind, Lost Metal is always sunset. It's always like almost right on the line of dark or light, because it's like, are they gonna? There's a race against time, and all these things are happening, and they have to go one more time. And I don't know. That's probably long and rambling. It doesn't make any sense, but I don't have to make sense because I bought the same talisman Wayne did off of a traveling fortune teller.
I would agree with Noble. I don't know that it goes all the way to dark, especially with the way it ends. I know it's supposed to be sad with Wayne and everything, but Wayne's death is still so hopeful, right?
They
Because
also change his hat every year.
they change his hat every year, and he has just this worthless feeling after everything that happened in his past. And this is almost his way of like, you can tell he finally feels redeemed. The fact that we all think he was redeemed a long time ago. He finally feels redeemed. He sees that he has done something that is so important. So I think Noble is a good place to put it. I don't know that I put it Noble Dark, but I don't know I'd put it Noblebright.
Yeah, definitely not Noblebright.
No.
And that's why I think it fits good in the third row or the middle row.
I think so.
Good.
All right.
Yeah.
And so in the comments, listeners, again, just like we did with last ones, where did we go wrong? What did we do right? And give us your opinions. We can maybe make adjustments. With
We
things
probably
that are
won't
made.
though.
Probably won't. We're pretty stuck in our ways.
Yeah, we're stubborn like that. But we're now to the meme off, the only part that you guys are all listening for anyway. Because you're like, if I have to listen to these yokels for the next 45 minutes, at least I can get a good meme out of it. Well, I promise you, you will get a meme out of it. Whether or not it's good, that's left up to viewer discretion. And it
I've
is
been sitting on
advised.
this one for months. I made it when I was bored. And finally, we have a chance for me to share it.
And the
Would you
memes
like
this
to go
week
first,
is
then?
Spren, by the way.
Yes, the theme
Just
is Spren.
Glorf, I think you should go first if you've been
Yes,
waiting
please.
for anticipation.
All right. So it's an Asian comedian. I don't know his name, but it's an Asian comedian. And there's a lot of jokes about Asian stereotypes of them all being smart and things like that, right? And so it's Syl saying, and this is a direct quote from the book. I looked it up. Cryptics like to plan. They debate and watch and never do anything. And then it has pattern. You understand you just insulted my entire race of people? But yes.
I like it.
Hey, thanks.
Awesome.
Doug, do you want to go next?
I would love to, if I can find the share screen button this time. There we go. Okay.
Down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
be
Green
useful
one.
by now.
So this is the trade offer meme. And under the bottom, it says Radiant Spread. And it says, I receive a bond to the physical realm. You receive crippling mental illness, because that's basically what the nail bond is. If you're crazy enough, you'll get an imaginary friend that only you can see that gives you special powers. And if it wasn't for the fact, you could now walk on walls and whatnot, people would just lock you up in the loony bin, because that's the only kind of thing a loony person would say.
Unless you can find
So.
someone else who can see Spren like rock.
Yeah. Oh, dang horn eater. It's crazy. Eats horns. Shells. Fort, you want to go for us?
Yeah. So I took mine in a slightly different direction, honestly. And it's the meme where the guy's looking up and he says, "Is this a Spren?" And it's a Sion with Aeon Rayo. Because Rosharans just think that's all a
Everything's a
Spren.
spin. Oh yeah, because she does. She thinks that in Rhythm of War, she thinks the Sion is some sort of weird spren.
I mean, but like, he's not wrong. It's 100% the same thing as
A
spread.
shard of investiture.
What are they
Sure.
called? Type 3, Type 4 biochromatic entities by Vasher?
I mean, we thought we had a solid understanding, and what was it? Words of Radiance. And then he completely uprooted it in Rhythm of War, and it's like, I don't know anymore. We'll figure it out eventually.
He's
Well,
grumpy.
viewers, give us your votes. Which one was the best? And the winner gets a high five.
Yeah, so we need votes.
So, everybody, get ready to read for our next cast. We're starting at right after the lesson. Next chapter start on is Sides, which is a Kaladin flashback chapter. So thanks everybody. Thanks for listening to Diggen's Point podcast. And this is the Doug signing off by saying, this is my lucky hat. I ain't never died while wearing this hat.
And this is Glorf signing off, saying, well, the honest answer right here, saying my battery's low, so it's a good thing it's time to go.
This is Fort signing off. I don't have a witty thing to say, so yeah.
That's witty enough. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.